Go.
Shalom, shalom. Giving honor and praise to the creator of heaven and earth. My name is Yeshaya Yisrael, tribe of Dan, nation of Israel. This is a presentation concerning the 1619 date that is generally purported and taught as when the first black people was brought over to what we call the United States as slaves or as captives. Such is not the case. The slave trade, as pointed out in part one of this, to the United States existed before that era and that time. That's one thing to make clear. Another thing is this. In 1619, the situation with Jamestown, Virginia, that was when the people who were the English or the British had already colonized a place that's called Virginia. How is it that you had a Dutch man of war that went over in 1619 with 20 black people as slaves? And he felt comfortable doing it when the Dutch did not have control of Virginia at that time. It's because the slave trade was already going on prior to that particular endeavor, or that particular act, that is, in 1619. The fact that the man that was a Dutch man of war that was recorded inside of the history of Virginia as bringing 20 black slaves over to Jamestown, Virginia, he felt comfortable doing it because that's what they were into, that's what they were doing. They was already involved in the slave trade. So I just wanted to sit there and point that out for reasoning and for edification purposes. All right? Now, the last slave ship that's recorded even by the New York Times to come into what we call the United States of America was dated from either 1859 or 1860, called the Clotilda ship. You understand? And that's talked about, brothers and sisters, in this book right here, Deuteronomy 28:15-68, in which, going into that particular aspect, brothers and sisters, we wanted to sit there and just show real quick, all right, if we will, a particular aspect concerning the slave trade and everything of that sort. When you look at this right here, this is a picture from the book right here, and I'm going to read what that plaque says, all right? And then we're going to close out in that particular aspect. It says, the old Plateau Cemetery, known as the Africa Town Graveyard, is the final resting place of enslaved Africans, African Americans, and a Buffalo Soldier. The burial ground dates back to 1876, 16 years after the Africans arrived on the Clotilda, which was a slave ship, which was one of the last documented slave ships to leave Africa for the Americas. The northern area of the graveyard is the oldest section where the remains of the Clotilda survivors have been found through an archaeological preservation project directed by the College of William and Mary. The historic annals of Africa Town are cherished upon tombstones in this graveyard. So when we sit there and look at this right here, this is in the state of what we call Alabama today. All right? Now, for those who are familiar, Alabama is also the name of a native tribe that lived in the state of Texas of today. So these are just certain things we want to point out for edification purposes. Creator willing, I'll be dropping a book, I'm thinking sometime this year, maybe early next year, about the evidence of the slave trade that came west, as well as the documentation of the slave trade that went east. Because we want to sit there and get this pointed out so there'll be less confusion, less misunderstanding. Because to try to marginalize saying, well, no quote-unquote black people came off of quote no damn slave ship over here in America. We just disproved that with the Africa Town matter in Alabama. But we also don't want to sit there and forget about the slave trade that went east, as well as the one that went from Africa north to Europe. Shalom.